All right, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whatever time it is, wherever in this world it is that you are. Welcome once more to another live stream of Alexandra Mayers Live, page by page reading and commentary of the modern English version of the Bible. So today we're going back into the first book of Samuel, chapter 17. And I think it's about to get exciting again when it comes to this Bible reading, because today we go into the story of David and Goliath, which is a story that even though you may not be a Christian or someone who believes in Christianity, most likely you have an idea as to what this story is about. But I'll tell you, part of the reason that I decided to embark on this page by page reading and commentary of the Bible is specifically because I want to know what the Bible truly says about it. I want the details that, for whatever reason, mainstream media and even our religious institutions sometimes gloss over or leave out. Those of you who have been with me on this Bible journey, thank you for coming with me on it, because um, really getting into the nitty gritty of the Bible it's a bit tedious. The book of Numbers, for example, was kind of boring, but that went into the families and whatnot that the Bible focuses on and their descendants. And hello, welcome to the chat person in the chat. But I've just been having fun with it. I know I haven't been as consistent with this reading as I would have liked to have been, but I do believe that I tend to get to certain areas of the Bible at the right time. I've noticed that things I read do tend to coincide with events in my life. So that's what's what. On a side note, I'm doing well. Um, Looking forward to getting into the holiday season. This Christmas will be a little bit sad for me because Christmas was my dad, who passed away earlier this year's birthday. So I don't really know what I'm going to do for Christmas this year. Just in order to keep my mental state where it needs to be, I probably will be spending Christmas alone this year. I have options. I have family dispersed throughout the country, but as I'm in my, going through my grieving process and, figuring out how I feel about certain things, I do enjoy my solitude. So we'll see. If I decide to be solo this Christmas, that'll give me an opportunity to do a lot of live streams. So I could do that. Um, I'll be with my family on the phone maybe, but I just don't know if I want to do any in-person get-togethers this year or really go out or do anything like that. Maybe next year. Maybe next year I will. Next year I'll do the family thing and go to parties and events and stuff. But I think this year I just kind of want to be alone with my thoughts this Christmas. So anyway, we'll see how it goes. Anyway, let's get into this chapter 17 of the first book of Samuel, David and Goliath. Here we go. Now the Philistines gathered their armies for battle and were gathered at Soko, which belongs to Judah. And they camped between Soko and Azekah in Ephes Damim. Saul and Israel's fighting men were gathered, and they camped in the valley of Elah. And they drew up in battle order. And I'm sorry, having a hard time talking today. And they drew up in battle order to meet the Philistines. Now the Philistines were standing at the base of the mountain on one side, and Israel was standing at the base of the mountain on the other side, and the valley was between them. There went out a champion from the camp of the Philistines. Goliath was his name, from Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and 1 span, He had a helmet of bronze on his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail. Now, the weight of the bronze coat was 5,000 shekels. He had greaves of bronze on his legs and a bronze javelin between his shoulders. The staff of the spear was like a weaver's beam. His iron spearhead weighed 600 shekels, and a shield bearer was walking before him. He stood and called out to the ranks of Israel, "Why have you come out to line up for battle? Am I not, I'm sorry, am not I the Philistine, and you the servants of Saul? Choose for yourselves a man and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and to strike me down, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and strike him down, then you will be our servants and will serve us." Okay, so Goliath was a really big guy, according to the description in the Bible. Um, in those times, they really kind of propped up people who were bigger than the rest because, as you are hearing, they were useful in battle and whatnot. It kind of bit them in the butt when it came to choosing kings and whatnot, as we saw with the whole Samuel Saul situation and how the Lord was upset about that. But well, I guess that was a spiritual lesson that these people at the time needed to learn, that bigger is not always better. The Philistines said, "I defy the battle lines of Israel this day. Give me a man and let us fight together." When Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were filled with terror and were greatly afraid. Now, David was the son of the Ephrathite of Bethlehem, and Judah, whose name was Jesse, who had 8 sons. And the man was old in the days of Saul and his advanced years. The 3 eldest sons of Jesse went and followed Saul to the battle. And the names of his 3 sons that went to the battle were Eliab, the firstborn, and next to him Abinadab, and the third was Shammah. As for David, he was the youngest. The 3 eldest followed Saul, but David would go back and forth from Saul to shepherd his father's flock in Bethlehem. The Philistines stepped forward morning and evening and took his stand daily for 40 days. There's that number again, 40. 40 is a very prominent and important number in the Bible. When the flood came, 40 days and 40 nights. Now we have 40 days again that they had to deal with Goliath. Then Jesse said to David his son, "Take now for your brothers an ephah of this parched grain and these 10 loaves, and run to the camp to your brothers. Carry these 10 cheeses to the captain of their 1,000, and look into your brothers' health, and bring back news to them." Again, the Bible is making me hungry. I'm telling you, I have been feeling so much better since basically embarking on a Mediterranean, some might even call a biblical diet. I have almost completely replaced beef with lamb, almost completely replaced chicken with salmon. I've been eating a lot of grains. I'm about to swear off white rice for brown rice. I like a lot of olive oil. Um, right here, they're talking about what were they just talking about? Cheese. Cheese. I might have some wine and cheese this afternoon as I do a recap on a little something over on another project I have going on. But those of you, of course, eat what's right for you. But especially if you're a woman and like your middle age, your body's starting to shift a little bit. I think that the biblical Mediterranean diet really is the way to go. I just wanted to share that. Anyways. Now Saul and they and all Israel's fighting men were in the valley of Elah, fighting with the Philistines. So David rose up early in the morning and left the flock with the keeper. And he carried away the provisions and went as Jesse had commanded him. And when he came to the encampment, the army was going out to the battle line, and they shouted a war cry. And Israel and the Philistines ordered themselves in battle lines, army against army. David left his things with the keeper of the equipment, and he ran to the battle line. And he went and greeted his brothers. As he was speaking with them, behold, the champion, the Philistine from Gath, Goliath by name, was going up from the battle line of the Philistines. And he spoke these same words, and David heard them. When all Israel's fighting men saw the man, they fled from him and were very afraid. The men of Israel said, have you seen this man who has come up? Surely he has come up to defy Israel. And it will be that the man who kills him, the king, will enrich with. Let's reread this. I am having a difficult time reading a little bit today. Have you seen this man who has come up? Surely he has come up to defy Israel. And it will be that the man who kills him, the king will enrich with great riches, will give him his daughter, and will make his father's house exempt from taxes in Israel. Oh, no taxes. That's great. Hopefully the daughter likes whoever this guy is. All these people giving away their daughters and everything. I think I'm having some issues reading today because this particular chapter, I'm wondering how they did the modern English version. Like, was it an actual human who rewrote this, or did they use a computer? Was it technology? Was it AI? That's what I'm wondering, because some of the ways that these sentences are structured are a little bit odd. The first paragraph of this chapter I thought was a little odd. Let's see, we're on 25. Let me reread the first chapter, because I had trouble reading it, and it wasn't me. It's how it's written. I mean, listen to how this second sentence is. It starts with the word and even, which is kind of a grammar no-no. And they camped between Soko and Azekah and Ephes Dammim. Saul and Israel's fighting men were gathered, and they camped in the valley of Elah, and they drew up in battle, ordered to meet the Philistines. See, I'm wondering how some of this was translated, and if the interpretation is even right, truthfully. I'm sorry to pause through this, but that's why I'm doing the commentary, because I think other people might feel as I do. And in the future, for whatever reason, if somebody comes across this, I want them to know that they're not the only one having a hard time deciphering a bit of what's said here. I'm going to read this sentence again. This is the second passage. It says, and they drew up in battle order to meet the Philistines. I'm thinking that this is miswritten. I think it needs to say, and they drew up in battle in order to meet the Philistines, or on the way to meet the Philistines. That's what I'm thinking. So, read this for yourself. That's why I do this chapter by chapter, but this is where I think discrepancies in the interpretation of certain biblical texts come into play, when it comes to the text being reformatted over the years, rewritten by people, human error. In the future, it'll be AI misinterpretation. So I don't know what we're supposed to do about that, but let's keep going. So back to where we were. The men of Israel said, have you seen this man who has come up. Surely he has come up to defy Israel. And it will be that the man who kills him, the king will enrich with great riches, will give him his daughter, and will make his father's house exempt from taxes in Israel. David spoke to the men that stood by him, saying, what will be done for the man that kills this Philistine and takes away his reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? And the people answered him in the same way, saying, so will it be done to the man who kills him. Eliab, his eldest brother, heard when he spoke to the men. And Eliab's anger was kindled against David, and he said, why have you come down here? And with whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your pride and the evil of your heart, for you have come down that you might see the battle. Eliab was not having it when it came to David that day. David said, what have I done now? Was it not only a word? And then he turned from him toward another and spoke in the same way. And the people answered him again, as at the first. When the words which David spoke were heard, they reported them to Saul, and he sent for him. David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go and fight with the Philistine. Saul said to David, you are not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you are but a youth, and he has been a man of war from his youth. So for some reason, at this moment, David is really confident. Was it him being naive, or did he internally know, hey, I'm going to win this? David said to Saul, your servant was a shepherd for my father's flock, and the lion came and the bear and took a lamb out of the flock. And I went out after him and struck him and delivered it out of his mouth. And when he arose against me, I took hold of his beard, struck him, and killed him. Your servant slew both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be as one of them, because he has reviled the armies of the living God, David said. The Lord who delivered me out of the paw of the lion and out of the paw of the bear, he will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine. Okay, so David had a lot of faith. He was a little cocky. As you heard, his eldest brother had an issue with him for some reasons. But David had a lot of faith, and David was like, look, I have dealt with some of the worst. I've had to deal with animals in the wild. This Philistine, he ain't no thing. I got God on my side. Let's go. All right, so let's continue. And Saul said to David, go, and the Lord will be with you. Saul clothed David with his armor, and he put a helmet of bronze on his head. He also clothed him with a coat of mail. David secured his sword to his armor and tried to walk, but he was not used to it, for he had not tested them. And David said to Saul, I cannot walk with these, for I have not tested them. So David took them off. He took his staff in his hand and chose for himself 5 smooth stones out of the brook, and he put them in his shepherd's bag, even in a pouch. And his sling was in his hand, and he drew near to the Philistine. Okay, so David's weapon of choice was the slingshot, as many of us know. And he didn't need the armor. He was like, look, I have been out trying to protect these sheep and everything most of my life. I know how to deal with wild beasts. This Philistine, essentially in my mind, is going to be nothing more than a wild beast, maybe even lesser of a beast than the lions and the bears and whatnot that I've contended with over the years. So let me just do this my way. And I've known people like that over the years. Sometimes, we're taught to do something a certain way to where it's supposed to be the right way, but that's why experience is important. A lot of young people need to understand this, and they don't understand this because we're in this era of technology and the internet and whatnot. But no matter how much you learn, no matter how much you're taught, meaning from somebody else or from an institution or something along those lines, until you're actually out there in the field and you gain the actual experience and time goes by with that experience, you don't know what you're doing at all. So this is a really good chapter and lesson from the Bible. So let's continue. The Philistine came walking and drew near to David, and the man bearing the shield went before him. When the Philistine looked and saw David, he despised him, for he was a youth and ruddy with a handsome appearance. The Philistine said to David, "Am I a dog that you come to me with sticks?" Then the Philistine cursed David by his gods. The Philistine said to David, "Come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the heavens and to the beasts of the field." Then David said to the Philistine, "You come to me with a sword, a spear, and a shield, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts and the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have reviled. This day will the Lord deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. Then I will give the corpses of the Philistine camp this day to the birds of the air and to the beasts of the earth, so that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. And then all this assembly will know that it is not by sword and spear that the Lord saves, for the battle belongs to the Lord, and he will give you into our hands." When the Philistine arose and came near to meet David, David hurried and ran toward the battle line to meet the Philistine. David put his hand in his bag and took from there a stone, and he slung it and struck the Philistine in his forehead. Therefore the stone sunk into his forehead, and he fell upon his face to the ground. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and with a stone, and he struck down the Philistine and slew him, but there was no sword in the hand of David. That would have been really impressive to everyone witnessing at that time. Now here's the question. Was David just a regular guy from that time, or did David have a special gift of being able to identify within his adversary, be it a person, a being, or a animal, where their weaknesses or where their weakness is? Because keep in mind, David was of a particular genetic line that was a little bit different than the majority of the people at that time. So, of course, God helped him, but were there other elements at play within David? I guess we'll never know, at least not in this lifetime. Therefore, David ran and stood over the Philistine. Then he took his sword and drew it from out of its sheath, and he finished him off and cut off his head with it. When the Philistines saw their champion was dead, they fled. And the fighting men of Israel and Judah arose and shouted. And they pursued the Philistines from the entrance of the valley of Elah as far as the gates of Ekron. So the Philistine dead lay slain in the road to Shaaraim, as far as Gath and Ekron. Then the Israelites returned from chasing after the Philistines, and they plundered their tents. David took the head of the Philistine and brought it to Jerusalem, and he put his armor in his tent. When Saul saw David going out against the Philistine, He said to Abner, the commander of the army, "Whose son is this? Whose son is this youth, Abner?" And Abner said, "As your soul lives, O king, I do not know." The king said, "Inquire whose son the young man is." So when David returned from slaying the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Saul with the Philistine's head in his hand. Saul said to him, "Whose son are you, young man?" And David answered, "I am the son of your servant Jesse, the Bethlehemite." And that's the end of chapter 17. That's the end. So you got this little guy who had a handsome face, who was very talented and obviously very intelligent, who's basically going to become the new king of these people very shortly as we continue with this reading. And Saul, who really never should have been king to begin with, because God didn't want a king at that point in time, he's feeling a little nervous. In fact, the subheading of chapter 18 of the first book of Samuel is Saul Fears David. But that was a really, really good lesson from the Bible. Sorry, I stumbled over a little bit of the reading in this chapter, but I'm not going to take fault for it. I think that however this was translated in a little bit of a sloppy fashion. It's a little awkward to read, really. Oh, hey, we have Gaudi in here. Good to see you. Thank you for coming in today. Sorry, this was a little bit of a stumbling reading, but sometimes it's like that, and it's been a few days that I took off from doing the reading. But I really like the story of David and Goliath. I really do. I'm glad we finally got this far into here. Yeah, well, this is the modern English version of the Bible, but it's not that modern anymore, is it? It's not that modern. So we'll keep going. I'm sure that there's more modern translations than this one, but we're sticking with where we are. We're in the first book of Samuel right now, but we're getting through. We're getting through. We're still in the Old Testament. We have a ways before we get into the New Testament. I'm probably going to start doing more than one chapter per day, starting not tomorrow, maybe the day after tomorrow, because I am excited to get to the New Testament. But we do have a ways to go. We definitely do. We've gone through Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, and now we're in the first book of Samuel. No, we haven't gotten there yet. We haven't gotten there yet, Gaudi. We have a ways to go. But things are getting a little exciting. Also, we're getting more into the familiar stories that a lot of us may have heard growing up and whatnot. So I'm going to get going. I got to do some work. And then at some point today, I do want to do a commentary and recap of a little something on the channel that Gaudi knows me from. So I'll hopefully get around to that. All right, everybody, take care. Have a great day. Thank you for listening once more. I'm Alexandra. Bye-bye.